Good afternoon, everyone. I am Tabitha Robinson, and I'm a board member for both WPCTN and Sister Cities of Nashville. Welcome to today's session entitled Women's Role in Politics Around the World. Today, WPCTN is partnering with Sister Cities of Nashville to bring this amazing program to you. And as many of you know, this is one of the many of our online programs this year. And if you're not a member of WPCTN, but have been enjoying programs like these throughout the year, we would love to have you join. There are so many benefits to membership beyond our great programming, and you can learn more about membership at WPCTN.com. Before we begin, I'd like to remind all of our attendees to keep your video and audio turned off during this program. Thank you so much. Now, I'd like to introduce Vice Mayor Jim Schulman. In addition to being the Vice Mayor of Nashville, he is the Executive Director of the Tennessee Commission on Aging and Disability. He received his bachelor's in law degree from Vanderbilt University, and he was also a Metro Council member from 1999 to 2007. Vice Mayor Schulman is an avid volunteer in his community, and he is affiliated with a wide array of organizations, including the Safe Haven Family Shelter, Renewal House, Adventure Science Center, Dismiss House, University School of Nashville, Green Hills Rotary, and Leadership Nashville. Vice Mayor Schulman, thank you for being here today, and now I will turn it over to you.
Well, thank you, Tabitha. It is a pleasure to be on this program because I love Belfast and the people of Belfast. What a great relationship between Nashville and Belfast. So I have been to Belfast 3 times on sister city trips, and I'm planning to go back there as soon as we get through with all the stuff that's holding us back, all this COVID stuff. I got to get back to Belfast. I really have enjoyed those travels so much. I went, I think, the first time in 2016 when Tracy Kane basically told me that I had to go. She twisted my arm and said, "You've got to get on a plane." It's like, I'm not even exactly sure where Belfast is. I got on the plane, and it was probably the greatest trip of a lifetime. I've been back twice more. It gets better all the time, but that first trip just phenomenal. For those of you who may not be exactly sure where Belfast is, it is in Ireland. It's in Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland and Southern Ireland are different, but they're on the same body. You just cross over, and I think the color of the traffic lanes change. That's about it. Everybody is so friendly. It is so nice. If you haven't visited there, you should. They have amazing things there. The Titanic Museum, Titanic was built there. They have what's known as the Peace Walls, the Giant's Causeway. It's a whole story in itself. They filmed a lot of the Game of Thrones there. They have a place called St. George's Market, which have some of the best desserts I've ever had. And they have paella just waiting for you to eat it right there in front. I know Patsy Cottrell and I, who I'm going to introduce in just a minute, I think we spent a lot of time in St. George's Market that evening trying different foods. At least I remember going to the paella place at least 3 times. So anyway, and I think this program is really, really good. And I think you will get a better understanding because of this program of why I personally and strongly believe that Belfast is a place that we should all be paying very, very close attention to. And we've got such a great connection between Nashville and Belfast. I call it a sociology experiment right in front of us with their past history and now their current efforts. They are working on bridging gaps between a divided nation. Sound familiar? This is not to say that everything they do works. I think Councilor Howard can tell you that. They know that they have challenges today and they've got challenges ahead, but they are trying. And the fact that they are trying makes them extremely important in my book and hopefully in yours. And I think you'll see it today, particularly with the discussion between our own council member Kathleen Murphy and Councilor Carol Howard. I need to recognize Mina Johnson, who is a former council member, and she's a board member of Sister City. She's on today's call. And before I get to introduce the moderator, we have a short video about Belfast that we're going to play right now. There we go. Doesn't it make you want to go? I say we leave this afternoon. Of course, I'm not sure if we can get over there, but we leave this afternoon. I was just watching that, and you know, I'm sure Patsy may mention this, but I'm going to steal her thunder. The mayor of Belfast is a woman, and she is an excellent CEO of that city. So it's my great honor of introducing today's moderator. She is a former Court of Appeals judge, former legal director for then Mayor Phil Bredesen. She's the former compliance officer under Mayor David Briley. She is a founding member of the Lawyers Association for Women. She spent many, many years at the Attorney General's office, including being the Chief Deputy Attorney General. She is a maker of chocolate cakes. She's apparently still looking for the recipe. She grows cornflowers. I don't know what that is. And she is a major participant in the Nashville-Belfast relationships. She goes on the trips with me. We always have a lot of fun, and we have not hurt anybody, particularly when Patsy's been driving. So with that, I introduce to you your moderator, Patsy Cottrell. Patsy, take it away.
Thank you, Jim. Yes, we have had fun. Jim gives goo-goo clusters to random people waiting for buses on the street, but hey. I am very happy to be participating. As Jim said, I've been active in the Belfast-Nashville relationship through Sister Cities, and it's been very rewarding and met a lot of great people, including Carol Howard. So I would like to proceed now just to introduce, and these are going to be very brief introductions because I'm going to get you to talk more about yourselves in a minute. First, we have Counselor Carol Howard. She is a member of the Belfast City Council, has been a member since 2011, and has been elected 3 times. She served 1 year as the High Sheriff of Belfast, an appointed position where the High Sheriff is the judicial representative of the Queen in Belfast. And I thought that was fascinating discussion of that role. Carol has served on a number of important committees in the council, and we're going to discuss some of those later in relationship to some of the questions that we have. We also have council member, Nashville Metro Council member, Kathleen Murphy. Kathleen's a native Nashvilleian, graduated from Hillsborough High School, having attended Father Ryan. She's been a member of the council since 2015, has long had an interest in public service and currently works as an advocate at the Tennessee State Legislature. Kathleen has also served on a number of committees in the council, which we are going to discuss later. We just learned a lot about Belfast, but Carol, can you tell us a little bit more just in terms of like population and where it is located geographically?
Yeah, good evening everyone, and it's a pleasure to join you all, and just say a quick hello. I did meet Mina Johnson in the council offices on my first trip in 2016. Yeah, there's approximately 630,000 of a population of Belfast. It sits in Northern Ireland, on the banks of the River Lagan and the Irish Sea. It is the largest city in Northern Ireland. Obviously, we have Dublin in the Republic of Ireland. We're only an hour's flying time from London, 20 minutes from Glasgow, half an hour from Manchester. So we're very accessible by sea and by air.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to get each of you to tell us just a little bit something more about you. Personal, professional, political, just a little something more so we'll get to know you. And Carol, would you mind starting?
Yep, certainly. Well, I currently have two jobs. So this job at council, and I also am a full-time childcare tutor at our largest college, Belfast Metropolitan, which actually featured in the little video. So in council here, it's not a full-time job, although it's not paid as a full-time job, but it is, so we have two full-time jobs. I got involved in politics many years ago after spending a lot of my business life in commercial broking. So I have a very strong business background before I went into the education sector. I think what inspired me to go into politics was, and we'll probably get into it through some of your questioning later, Patsy, as someone who grew up through the Troubles in Northern Ireland, I always had an interest in politics. Nothing major, but was interested in it. My father was a life-serving police officer in the Royal Ulster Constabulary. So my family went through many very difficult years through the Troubles. And one of the things I really wanted, especially when I had children of my own, was to make sure that we worked towards this peaceful society and this shared future for everyone. I think the push that I needed to jump into that political world came, strange enough, at one of my daughter's prize days at her school, where the guest speaker happened to be my now current party leader, Naomi Long, who is also our Minister of Justice in our executive. And she was an old girl of the school, and she spoke so beautifully about how young women should be encouraged to dream and be whatever they want to be, and that, you know, really there's nothing to stop you. And she had just come back having taken part in 2006 in the St Andrews Agreement, which led to the peace process. So I decided, you know, I could do something here, and I volunteered for it. I offered to go and stuff envelopes and canvas and campaign, and I did that. Thoroughly enjoyed it, and then took up several roles, one of them being chair of the Alliance Association. And then I was asked to stand for election for the first time in 2011. So my children were, not that they didn't need me, but one was already at university, one was about to go to university, and I felt it was a time in my life where I could actually do something totally different from what I had done. So, you know, apart from that, 3 elections later, I'm still standing. Sometimes it's not easy. But I have to say that, you know, apart from obviously my family and my children, this has been one of my biggest achievements, where I have actually really had to push myself outside my comfort zone to do this, and I love doing it. So that's just a little brief.
It was great. I think what you were talking about first getting involved was essentially what we would call working for a party. like the Democratic Party or the Republican Party or independents or whatever, but doing sort of within the organization, not as an elected person yourself, right? You began that way.
Absolutely. I volunteered. Yeah.
Kathleen, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, personal, professional, political?
You. Yes, I heard in a lot of things that Carol said, a lot of similarities where I grew up here in Nashville. My family, though, was in politics. So a lot of times when when I first ran for office in 2015, they would say, "You're so young to be in politics. How did you get involved so young?" And I'd be like, "Young? I've been stuffing envelopes for my parents or candidates since I was a child." So I feel like I've been involved much longer than my years, I guess. And so I grew up here. My father was a state representative. He actually represented the area that I represent. Obviously, that district was much bigger than my district. And he actually lives in his childhood home in my district. So I really am rooted here in West Nashville and have a great resource to know the history of different parts and different aspects of the neighborhoods that I represent. And then, but growing up, after my father left office, both of my parents were lobbyists, representing primarily nonprofit groups. And so I joined them in their lobbying firm after I graduated college, and also worked on campaigns, and kind of still, consult and volunteer and things like that. But also my mother was on the election commission from when I was in kindergarten until I guess about when I was in high school. So it wasn't that one parent or the other was an influence it wasn't just elected office. It was that, we were expected to be involved in public life. My family and my faith teaches me that to whom much is given, much is expected. And I really feel that Nashville has given me so much and so many opportunities that I need to give back and serve in whichever way that is called. And so in leading up to 2015, as my council member was termed out, not seeing someone that I thought represented my views, or people that I knew, I decided to run for office. It really wasn't something that I had thought about when I was younger. I think we always thought actually my brother would be the one that ran for office instead of me. But I ran in 2015. And so I'm serving my second term now. I did not have an opponent last election cycle in 2019. So that either means that I'm doing a good job or that really nobody wants to be on the council these days. But I really enjoy it. And so it's brought me the ability to give a perspective from a younger point of view, where I think on the council we've had lifelong Nashvillians on it before, but not I'm not quite a millennial. I'm 36 now, but I was just 29 when I was first elected. So bringing the young Nashvillians' point of view at that time to council, I felt was really unique. And while we weren't, we had a record number of women on that council. We are now up to this term, we are up to 50% representation. And so that's really exciting, especially since this past August was the 100th year anniversary of Tennessee passing and ratifying the 19th Amendment and being the 100th anniversary of suffrage in Tennessee. So that's a little bit of my background. And as you mentioned, I work as a lobbyist at the state legislature. My main client had been firefighters, a very male-oriented career role. And then now I represent nurses, which is a very female-oriented stereotype. And so that's been very interesting to look at those gender roles as well and the political viewpoint from the state legislature.
And I understand, of course, that you two know each other. Would you explain how you met each other?
Yeah, I met Carol when she came over to Nashville. I was on council at that time, so I met her then, and we became Facebook friends. And then when I went to Belfast last year as part of the Sister Cities trip, we hung out, and actually it was Nashville and Belfast week while I was there. And so we actually had Monell's while we were over there. Monell's had gone over there to serve. So it was very, very Nashville, but in a very different setting.
Good. Carol, could you tell us just a little bit about your council? Is it purely a legislative body, and how many people are on it, and how diverse is it gender-wise?
Okay, so the council, we have a chief executive. So unlike Nashville, where you have different powers and your mayor has different powers, we have a chief executive who is a female, Suzanne Wiley, and we have council officers and directors that work alongside our chief executive. Then we have the elected representatives, and at the moment we have 60 elected councillors sitting in the chamber. It is quite a diverse group, but not as diverse as it could be. And when I was sitting looking at these figures, so right now we have 16 females out of the 60. 8 of those are from different parties. Now, my party is one of 2 who have 50-50. We have 5. We have 10 elected members for the Alliance Party, and 5 of those are female. So we're a very high percentage in my party of female to male. We do have diversity in cultural background and age diversity, a very wide range of ages. But we don't presently have any councillors from an ethnic minority background. Now, that is probably something that would be represented in Northern Ireland quite a lot, simply because we wouldn't have had a huge amount of ethnic minorities who were living in Belfast and were wanting to run for council. That is now changing, and I believe that will change, because we are very much now a diverse city, and that will be changing. My own party, we have diversity very much, but the council as a whole. So that's basically how that runs. Currently in the chamber, we have 2 women who hold offices on committees this year. Our committees change every year. The year that I was High Sheriff was one of the years where we had almost a full table of female leaders in City Hall. So I was High Sheriff. We had our female Chief Executive. We had a female Lord Mayor. We had a female Deputy Lord Mayor. And one of the interesting things in my first few months as High Sheriff, when we had one of the royal visits by Prince Charles, we were lined up at a venue to be introduced to him. And it was actually quite something to look along the line and see all the women from Belfast City Council. And he made a comment. He made a comment about it as well. So I think we're obviously doing something right. So we are very diverse, and my party really encourages women, especially into politics. I'm not sure how much more you want me to go into women's roles, Patsy, at the moment within the council.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of get the basic setup of the government. Yeah. As a council member, you serve a district, right? You're elected from districts. And do you campaign for office? Do you have opponents? Do you have to raise money?
So I currently serve the Titanic district electoral area, and actually the Titanic picture behind me, which I've had since the 80s, long before I was in politics. So we run for election every 4 years. We do campaign beforehand. We have association offices for our individual parties that help us, and we have volunteers who help us as well to plan for those elections. Now, we all work together to do that, and there are certain rules that have to be followed. For instance, if there's certainly money-wise, I don't personally have to raise the money to stand for election, so that should never be a barrier to someone wanting to seek office. And that's a huge big thing here. So it doesn't matter if you don't have that money behind you, you can still fight and stand for election. we have our association fundraises, and through those funds we pay for our campaign literature, posters, leaflets that we go door to door with. And we have an office. We usually set up a local campaign office. Now, I'm in East Belfast, so each association within North, South, East and West Belfast and right across Northern Ireland, all of our parties would have their own associations, and that East Belfast Association helps us run our campaigns.
Kathleen, we know that's a little different. You might have to raise your own money, right?
That is very different. Well, we have just like at the state and federal level, we have two political parties that are active here in Davidson County, but they don't necessarily get heavily involved in our campaigns or the local elections. I think that is something that is changing, and over this recent cycles and in the future I expect it to change. But we are a nonpartisan body. You can identify as a party, but we are nonpartisan, and our districts are drawn in a nonpartisan way, which we're about to go through redistricting, and I'm excited to be a part of that process on the Planning Commission. But it is I have to make the phone calls and raise the money myself. And as a 29-year-old running for office the first time, I was fortunate to have the connections through civic organizations that I had been involved in. Although I do joke that really it was a lot of families that I babysat for, or that women that I had swim class with, and then men that I was in the downtown Rotary with. I mean, a very wide variety of people. And then also it helped that I had family political connections that helped me fundraise for my first election. But my opponent did outraised me in that election 2-1. But I set a limit, because where my district will have maybe 5,000 people vote, a district next to me has about 1,500 people vote in their election. And those are very different races. And where my race in my district tends to be more expensive, not every district in Nashville is that expensive, but a race could cost anywhere from $15,000 to $60,000 or $70,000 for a council race. And I think that is getting to be too much. And I think that is a barrier to people getting elected, and something that, that's a whole nother discussion to get into. But I think that is a barrier to the socioeconomic diversity on our council, is that you need to be able to put some skin in the game, and you need to be able to have the time from your work to dedicate to council. Because as Carol mentioned, ours is a part-time council, but it really is a full-time job.
And in the past, it used to be said that women had a really hard time raising money for themselves. Of course, we used to raise money for other people too. Do you think that's gotten better? Or do you think there's any real distinction anymore in the ability to raise money?
I haven't looked at campaign disclosures in a little bit, because I've tried to step back from so much electioneering. But I do think that for women personally, just our nature is, it's hard to make that ask, because we feel like we're asking for ourselves, where men are not as emotionally tied to that. And really, since I've been a fundraising consultant for candidates, I have to remind them and remind myself, this is not asking for money for a new outfit or new jewelry. This is asking to raise money to make our neighborhood better, to elect me or elect themselves as a candidate, so we can preserve our quality of life in Nashville. And so you really have to, I think once we shift our mindset to that is the goal that we're fundraising for, it makes more sense. You have to put aside that kind of natural inclination of I feel like I'm asking for myself. It's not for myself, it's for what we equally believe in.
What challenges, Carol, I'm going to go back to you now. What challenges do you think you've faced in being an elected official that as a woman, that maybe is different?
Well, I think that there definitely have been challenges, and um, certainly as a lady who is a little older than Kathleen, of a certain age, I think there's a challenge too to want to still feel relevant to some people, not be overlooked, and I think that you have to maybe speak up for yourself a lot more. I think that is a challenge. You have to push yourself, where maybe it's not natural to you to want to be in the limelight or push yourself forward. It is actually something, and this is what I was talking about earlier, getting outside of your comfort zone a little bit. I do think, I mean, I've learned to speak up for what I believe in. I still do think that there are some men, certainly in elected positions, I'm sure all over the country and the world, who sometimes do need convincing that women are up to the job, and they're not doing it as some sort of hobby or something to pass the time, you know. But I think certainly in Belfast, particular maybe to me, and Kathleen, you may have some similarities in a different way, but here in Belfast, there's certain communities, especially in my area that I represent in East Belfast, and it will be the same all over. There's certain communities that we have to talk with and negotiate with people who may still be associated with particular groups, paramilitary groups from the past, where from when the troubles here, and they're still entrenched sometimes in small groups, not many, but there are times that we have to engage with people, and it can be, as a woman, it can be quite scary. You are sort of putting yourself out there, and especially if you're a woman and you're a mother as well, you have other responsibilities, and yet you choose to make this a responsibility to the people you represent. So you have to go in there, and I do think sometimes as a woman you might not be seen to be doing as much as men, when in fact I think sometimes, not all the time, but I'm sure we do a lot more than we're given credit for. So yeah, there are many challenges, and I think that we're going in the right direction.
Good. Kathleen, can you talk about if you've what challenges you have faced as an elected representative, and maybe the ones that seem to be particular to being a woman?
I agree. Yes, there's still some good old boy clubs, and well, that's changing in Nashville because we have so many more women being elected as judges, as countywide offices, and having 50% of the council be women now has definitely changed the game. I think my experience as a lobbyist at the state level, where we, the Tennessean had an article this week, and I hope I'm quoting this number right. I think it was we're 17% women are represented at 17% at the state legislature. We're 49th out of 50 states for representation at the state level. I think given that experience, coming into the council, I probably didn't face as many barriers or self-doubt to just insert myself in the conversation when men would leave me out, when some of my colleagues might leave me out or talk around me. Or
not hear you? Have you had the not hear you? Yes.
Right. Like maybe actually not hear me and not want to hear me sometimes.
Didn't speak low enough for the message to get through. Yes.
Exactly. But I've never been accused of being quiet, and that is something that is a blessing and a curse. And so that is where I think also where Carol mentioned that this isn't a hobby. I'm not doing this as some cutesy thing, and some less so than my colleagues treating me that way, but more so meeting with developers or engineers or architects that wanted zoning changed in my district. A lot of times I felt like they were treating me as not as an equal, and really disrespecting the office and the people, my constituents that elected me. And again, I I would stand up for myself and tell them, you know, this is the way it is, and I'm the one who is the decision maker because I was elected. And so if you disrespect me, you are disrespecting the constituents that elected me. And so kind of keeping that in mind helped me a lot of times if I would lose my confidence, because I just simply wasn't given the same respect from others that my male colleagues were receiving.
Both of you serve on committees in your council that have to do with women in government, women in leadership roles. One, Kathleen, you're on the Metro Council Women's Caucus and have been the chair and the vice chair. And Carol, you're on the, I'm sorry, I can't find, Women's Steering Group. Can you just talk a little bit about those groups and sort of why they formed and what their emphasis has been? I'll start with Carol.
Okay. Yes, the Women's Steering Group in Belfast, this year we haven't been as active due to COVID. Some of our committees haven't been running, the major committees that have to function, the council are running. So the women's group look at different areas that the group bring themselves to the chair. You know, they will look at anything. I mean, one of the big things that we did over a period of several years was look at gender equality. That was a massive piece of work that went on in the Women's Steering Group. One of the things that I took advantage of, and some of my colleagues as well, was we undertook a Women in Leadership program. So we were encouraged, and I've been speaking to Catherine about this before, we were encouraged to have continuing professional development. And through that, I was able to do a Women in Leadership course, which took 6 months and was so important. And this all came out of the Women's Steering Group. Some of our council officers came and took part, and our chief executive came and took part. And it looked, amongst other things, at our roles and how we felt we functioned in that male environment, you know, in an office, how we managed scenarios, how we did, you know, but it was so worthwhile. And we bring in women from our communities to talk in our steering group. We have, it's very, very wide ranging. And one of the lovely things we did a few years ago was we had installed a beautiful new stained glass window in our council. And this takes a long time to do, and there's not very many times you can do this or places to put them. And it was to represent the great women of Belfast. And this all came through the steering group. And I was one of 2 councillors who were asked to be on the judging panel to find the artist to do this window. And this window represented the suffragette movement as well. And if you've been into City Hall, those of you who've been will have maybe seen it. And it represents the working class women of Belfast through the years, and how as women through troubles and world wars, women kept things going. So this was a hugely monumental window, and it was unveiled on International Women's Day. So this steering group will look at all sorts of issues. You know, it will look at racism, it will look at issues of consent and you know, all sorts of issues, bullying, everything. So it's a really good steering group, and we're hoping to have our first meeting in the next month or 2 to get it up and running again.
Kathleen, can you talk about the Women's Caucus?
Yes.
In the council?
I will say the stained glass windows at the City Hall in Belfast is just amazing. And that window was very inspiring. And so I've got a picture of that while I was there. So the Women's Caucus, we started up last term. It had been evidently ebbed and flowed in previous terms, and I was the chair of it last term and carried into this term. And what I initiated at first was doing a resolution every month about women's issues, just not something that we necessarily needed to, you know, pontificate on the floor about, but at least raising that awareness. And so that's something that I've been assigned to to kick back off for this term, and because Council Lady Berkeley Allen is now the chair of that, and she's really making it more active. I think as an at-large member, she has a little more time, which I so appreciate, and I'm glad she's carrying that forward. Some legislation that we've kind of came together last term was we realized that elected officials did not have to take sexual harassment prevention training here in Nashville, and that just doesn't make sense to me. And so I sparked that idea, and we did get that drafted and passed. And then I took that a step further as chair, and my colleagues supported me, and all the other council members were co-sponsors, including former Council Lady Mina Johnson, who's on here, who's one of my best friends on council. And we made it a requirement that if you contract with Metro, if your employees could appear to be a Metro employee, say through traffic calming or a water project or a sidewalk project, that company has to do sexual harassment prevention training of their employees. And so I think that's important. While it wasn't a huge splash, it's not gonna, make a big difference, but it could change one interaction that could make a difference. And so those are some things that have come out of the Women's Caucus last term. I'm excited to see what we're gonna do, but I'll be honest with you, what is the difficulty with a Women's Caucus, especially when you have 20 women on it, is we all have a lot of different interests, and we all have very busy lives. And so we're kind of pulled in different directions, but we always still can come back together on that common theme of, for example, most recently we made a statement about some sexual harassment allegations in the Metro Police Force. And so we could still come together and say, as women, we identify and we are making this statement. And I think that's important, that while we might not have a huge legislative agenda or programs all the time, the fact that we can come together in an organized way to support other women is important.
Did you have any, when these groups were first started, did you have any male colleagues ask why you needed something specifically for women? Yeah.
Oh yes, there were jokes about it, which is fine. I said, y'all have had your boys club for long enough. It was, y'all just weren't organized enough to call it a name. We were just organized. Well, women.
Right. When we started Lawyers Association for Women, those many years ago, 81 or whatever, a lot of male lawyers would ask us why we needed one, because there wasn't a male bar association. And we said, yes, there is. It's called the Nashville Bar Association.
I certainly think in Belfast that not too many men in City Hall especially would want to ask that question, seeing we had so many females in leadership roles in the council, because they would be sent to Suzanne Wiley.
That's always good to have the control over the purse too, is always. Have you seen when you first came to council, and this is probably a little bit more for Carol, but were there some things that would reflect that they weren't used to having women there that have been changed?
Yes, absolutely. Over the years, the council has become a much more, the City Hall has become a much more female-friendly environment. I mean, the fact that we, again, when I was serving as High Sheriff, my colleague Nuala McAllister was the mayor, and she had a very young child, and she would bring him in to the parlour sometimes, and in fact, she finished her term off, and she was expecting another child, and she has her portrait hung in City Hall, the first time that a female Lord Mayor had her portrait done with her child in it as well, sitting playing at her feet, which is very representative of the Belfast City Hall council setup that we all want. Even through the women's steering group, City Hall has changed, that we have special changing rooms for parents to take their children into, children with specific needs, and these could be young adult children as well, who need special changing areas and toileting facilities. That has all changed as well. We have gender neutral bathrooms now, which is something quite recent. But certainly, yes, it has become a much more friendly place to be as a woman, and actually, you know, I feel totally respected in our city hall.
Good. Do you think there are any particular expectations that are placed upon you all as women leaders or women elected officials that are different from expectation placed on men? And do you think those expectations come mainly from men, mainly from women, or just in general? And I'll ask you, Kathleen.
I do. I actually was texting with a female council member this morning. She was complaining that a news organization had taken a clip from a committee that she didn't have her hair and makeup done yet.
Yeah.
And I reminded her that that's why I don't have my video on if my hair and makeup is not done. I don't know if that's necessarily because of my age or just who I am or because of my profession, but I do feel like I need to be look a certain way. I need to have my hair brushed and I need to have makeup on, and probably because I've worked around the legislature, there are certain things like sleeveless, wearing sleeves is something that I consider you would not go onto the council floor without sleeves on, or if you are wearing something sleeveless, you put a sweater on. I think that probably comes from working at the state legislature, and something I probably just carried over, even though the council is more relaxed. Because I mean, a lot of councilmen last term and this term will come in jeans with a blazer on. But if I wore my running leggings, even if I have a blouse on top of it, you know, a comment will be made like, oh, did you just come from a run? And I want to be like, did you just come from doing landscaping? You know? And so, which is fine when you're a video and you're just from the waist up, but you know, those are some things that I think are different, perception wise, that it could just be me personally, but I do think that we should, again, it's kind of like respecting the office we've been elected to. You need to look respectable while you're holding it.
And you have expectations as to your appearance that may not be there so much with male candidates or male elected officials.
Right.
Carol?
Right. And I will say too, I did get some questions when I was running for office about where my children would go to school, if they would go to public or private school, because I went to Catholic school and then I finished at public school. And I'm not sure that my male colleagues or male candidates that I've worked with have ever been asked that. And so as a single woman, I would joke that when you meet, you know, if you meet their father, let me know. I'd love to discuss it with them, you know, and just kind of laughed it off. So
Carol.
I fully agree with most of what Kathleen, in fact, all of what Kathleen has said is very similar here as well. I do think that there is this expectation that maybe we put it on ourselves, that we have to at least perform as well as, or if not outperform the men, because we need to be seen to validate ourselves for being there nearly. And you know, there are times when you might be chairing a committee, or you're on a committee where maybe a woman has to go early for some reason or other, and someone might make a comment about, you know, having to go home to look after the children, or you know, some things that you wouldn't say to a man. And I do think that, and I think that's we've got to fight against that ourselves. And you're right, you do feel you have to look a certain way to be on an equal playing field at times. And I do think sometimes here, the media, we have a lot of social media stuff here as well. There's an awful lot of things that go on social media about women and how they look in politics. We have had some members, female members from different political parties, being called out on social media for not looking a certain way, or for being too made up. So you can't win. You really can't win. And I think the answer is that you just do what you feel is right, and you just don't, you know, don't go in with those expectations weighing on your shoulders, because you'll never meet them all. You meet your own expectations and those of your constituents, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, I know when I first started practicing law way back when, we all, the women lawyers that around town, always felt like we had to do everything so much better than the men, that we never, there was this pressure never to sort of let other women down, that we had to be really good at what we did so that other women would be considered for those jobs. And you're saying essentially that's still, you still feel that way very much.
I mean, I think so. I mean, in Northern Ireland, though, at the moment, we are very blessed. I mean, we have a lot of female leaders here, and you know, the tide has definitely turned. I mean, our first and deputy first ministers and our Stormont executive are women. My party leader and the justice minister is a female. We have strong females right to the top of our government here. So things are changing. But even with those top female positions, you know, I'm sure there were people who thought, are they up to the job? You know, should we have all women in those two important roles? Should we not balance it out a little bit? You know, if they are good and meet the requirements of that job, that's why they're there, not because of wearing high heels or lipstick, you know.
Right. As there are more women like in the council or in political leadership roles, as you were saying, like the executives, do you see a shift in sort of how things are done, how the council sort of operates, how the what's the approach to solving problems? The more women that are there, they make sort of a difference, you think?
Yeah,
because there are more.
Yeah, I think so. I think that women, and this is just my personal opinion. I think that women are generally seen to be, and again, this seen to be. We shouldn't even say that. I think we are seen to be peacemakers, maybe more so than men. You know, you can go in and you can have that softer touch, but yet the firm hand to still negotiate. But you can see a bigger picture. I mean, I certainly feel as a woman that I can look at a much bigger picture. I don't go in with a tunnel vision. And I think that we're you know, those leadership roles, they're balancing such a lot. Yeah, I mean, that's just, I don't know, Kathleen, what do you think? I mean,
yeah, Carol, like we spoke about before, is that women naturally seem to be more of the peacemakers, the ones looking for a compromise. While we might be dug in on a position, you know, often another woman might come over to help bridge the gap between where I'm dug in and where someone else is dug in. Or often I feel compelled, if there are two dug in positions, to see if we can find that compromise between the two. And I think that's just a bit of our nature, and just the gender role that we are embodying, that has become our nature, is that we don't want to see people fighting. We do want to put, like, kind of like I was talking, we want to put on a good face. And so sometimes, like, if there has been something stirring up between council members, a personal issue between them, trying to work through that, or elevating it to the vice mayor, to someone else, to say, hey, or at least I feel like I have, and some other of my female colleagues have said, let's work this out, because it doesn't need to become an issue on the floor. It doesn't need to get in the way of us doing our job and leading Nashville. And so I've seen women take on that role in the council more than men.
yeah.
And I know, Kathleen, I was reading your bio, and I know that you really emphasize the need for working together and finding common ground as the key to success to bettering Nashville, essentially, in our communities. Okay, this is, I think, my last question, and then if you all want to talk, we'll be happy to hear anything you want to say. Carol, you're a member of your council's City Regrowth and Regeneration Committee, which I think involves some planning, land use, those kinds of issues, you know, what we would call like greenways and livability that way. And Kathleen has a similar focus with her neighborhood work and being on the planning committee and that kind of stuff. So, but I think livability, quality of life issues include a lot more than just sort of the physical environment. And I think that both you have an interest in bridging the challenges that exist in both places relating to divisions, and that sort of unifying citizens for common goals and common good to provide a fair and just community is important to both of you. Would you like to talk about sort of your efforts in that, or your city's efforts in that, or if you see women as having a different role in that, to have a shared future among all the citizens in your cities? Kathleen, I'm going to ask you to start.
Sure. So I currently serve as the planning chair. For those of y'all who are not aware of what that is, we have a planning, zoning, and historical committee on council, and the chair is elected for a 2-year term, and so elected by the council, and then that gives me a seat on our planning commission that is made up of other citizens and a mayoral representative. And I think that our planning commission and planning department, it now is led by Lucy Kemp, who is obviously a woman who is the head of that department. And I think she really, as we've talked about compromise and things like that, I think she has really changed that department in a way to bring about where we don't have as more zoning and planning issues or seem to be worked out prior to coming to the commission and having a battle out at the commission. And I think that that's what Nashville and planning has sought to do through doing a lot more community engagement, whether it was the Nashville Next scenarios and process that we went through about 6 years ago. That's our general plan and sets up our policies for land use across the county. And then the planning department continuously, year in and year out, does small group plans to update that general plan. And they really do, oh my goodness, they work overtime to get community input, to reach out, to get a steering committee of local neighbors, and then have other neighbors come in to give input on what they'd like to see in the area, and to change or not to change, what to keep, what to preserve, what needs to be redone. And so I think Nashville has done a really great job in engaging neighbors, but fundamentally there are parts of Nashville that has been historically left behind in that process. And a lot of that is carried over from decisions made long before I was born. The way that our interstate system comes through Nashville, and literally it divided communities. It cut up communities and left them on the vine to wither. And so we do, and the planning department and I as a council member, and I think most of the council, feel that we have an obligation to go a little bit further to engage those communities. And typically they are the communities of color, and they are the lower socioeconomic communities. And so I think because of that history that we have, we do have a moral obligation to be more responsive and making sure that they are heard through community planning process. So that was our Nashville Next. We also had In Motion, which was a transit oriented plan. We have a sidewalk plan. We have Plan to Play, which is parks and recreation. And currently at the council, we're debating the new Mayor Cooper's transit plan. And that's something that as well, several council members, we deferred it this last meeting in order to really have it discussed as a council. And so I think that's our obligation, is because of we not just have to represent who has elected us and who we represent now. We need to keep in mind and keep that historical perspective of who has been left out in the past. And then also I feel an obligation to think about the future. Anytime we change the land use policy for a corridor or a piece of property or allow a different zoning, we need to think past the short-term use of this property owner or this business coming in, because as we're seeing right now with the pandemic, companies are leaving their office buildings. What is going to happen to that next? What does that mean for those area businesses that relied on those office workers for lunch? And so it's a broad thing. We need to think forward, but we cannot forget really what developed that. And so I'm excited about the redistricting process to redraw the lines for the council districts, because I think that's another opportunity to not forget or erase our history of be it segregation or the way that community resources were allocated in the past, but it's a way to kind of right those wrongs, and we can never make up for them, but we can try to make things better and make things more equitable across the county.
Thanks. Carol?
Goodness, yeah, that's a lot of really good stuff there, Kathleen. I mean, we run slightly differently. The City Growth and Regeneration is a committee which I have chaired and vice chaired. We don't have planning as part of our committee. We have a separate planning committee, but almost everything comes through City Growth and Regeneration. So it's the committee that looks at our Belfast agenda for the coming 20 years. We look at promoting the greenways, the walkways, the city centre living, the livability of Belfast, the grade A offices. All of that comes through our committee, but we do go through rigorous consultations. And obviously in Belfast, we do have the historical issues from the past, where particular groups of society and residents don't want something to happen or change in their community. For instance, we have had something recently about street signs being in Irish language as well, and certain street signs, and this did create quite a lot of tension on some of the committees about this, and that's a historic thing, because there's a certain sector of the community that want to have the Irish language, even though it's not a widely used language as it is the Irish language, and they have a right. So we're coming to a compromise. We've come to a compromise on how we do that, and how we let the neighbourhoods decide, asking the people, the residents themselves, on individual cases. City Growth looks at, we have this Belfast agenda now, which is extensive engagement and consultation with members of the public and major stakeholders. And we done our first city community plan back in 2017. It's looking at economic development, making life easier for residents, competitiveness in the market, in the business market as well, sustainability, and our educations and skills sectors. Some of our most deprived areas, and some are in my constituency in East Belfast, where we have underachievement, especially in, it would appear to be a certain age group of young Protestant men. And that can be an issue too. If you give something to one community, or you give funding, then another community is going to say, well, we haven't got that funding. So we have working groups within the council, and we have one for North, South, East and West. I'm on our East working group, and that's where we get in just the councillors for East Belfast. We get in and we look at the projects in our area, and we sit around the table and we work it out, and we work out a strategy. How do we do the best for everyone here? I sit on a policing committee, the East Belfast District Policing Partnership, and through that, we're looking at the safety aspect of our city, and the money for that committee comes from the Department of Justice. So we have to involve the police and work along with the police. And in fact, on my visit to Nashville, Tracy Drykane took me to one of the police precincts, where we spent a morning so that I could take some ideas back from Nashville to Belfast. And we will look at resourcing projects for interface areas. So we have an area in my constituency where it runs from what would have been predominantly a Protestant community to a prominently Catholic nationalist community. And there would be a lot of trouble at that wall, that interface. And how do we get these projects running to reach those hard to reach young people who you're going to lose out? And one of the interesting things we done on a project was everything seemed to be, and actually this goes back to women, everything seemed to be groups of young men were getting this funding for different things. And I said, well, what do we do for young women? Where is the funding going for young women here? And we actually got a project up and running at the interface where we looked at engaging the young women who were girlfriends of the young guys in the area, sometimes that were engaged in antisocial behavior and whatever, thinking that perhaps they could be good influencers on the guys. And we done projects involving our local police officers and Belfast City Council engagement officers, projects which sometimes took the girls out for a week or two, done things with them. And we're seeing great benefits from things like that, where young women.
I'm sorry, that was great. I was supposed to stop a little while ago, but I love the story about the girlfriends and all that. So I think it is time for us to close the program. You talked about the Belfast agenda, which is this very comprehensive planning document that I think is probably online, isn't it? If people are interested, they can go to the Belfast City website and see that agenda if you're interested. I want to thank both of you. I think this has been really enjoyable and interesting, and thank you both.
Thank you very much for the invite. Thank you. See you soon, Kathleen. See you soon, Patsy in Belfast.
Oh, good, Carol. I'll be there.